Grant brought his mistress into our house to watch me sign the divorce papers. That was the part one remembered most clearly. Not the thick cream-colored envelope he placed on the dining table. Not the $20,000 settlement written into the agreement. Not even the paragraph demanding that I give up the house, his company, and any right to future support. It was Lila Benton standing beside him in the kitchen I had designed. She rested one hand on the marble counter and looked around as though she were already deciding what to change. "Sign it tonight," Grant said. "We can file in the morning and avoid making this ugly." I turned to the final page. The signature line waited beneath my name. Naomi Vale. I had kept my own surname when we married. Grant once said he admired that. Later, when his company began appearing in business magazines, he started introducing me as Mrs. Rourke. The agreement offered me $20,000 and 6 weeks to move out. Grant would keep the Cambridge house, both cars, his retirement accounts, and every interest connected to Aurelia Grid Systems. According to the financial statement attached to the agreement, Aurelia had little present value because its shares were restricted and the company carried substantial debt. That part was almost funny. Aurelia was the company Grant described as a billion-dollar opportunity whenever investors were listening. In the divorce agreement, it had suddenly become a worthless burden he was generously willing to keep. "You expect me to sign this?" I asked. Grant loosened his tie. "I expect you to be realistic." Lila looked down, pretending the conversation embarrassed her. She had been Grant's chief of staff for 18 months. 3 months earlier, I found a hotel receipt in his jacket from a weekend he claimed to have spent in Chicago. He told me it was for a client. The client turned out to be Lila. "Realistic about what?" I asked. "About what you contributed." Grant sat across from me. At 44, he had learned how to make impatience look like authority. His photographs appeared beside phrases such as visionary founder and clean energy innovator. "You haven't worked in 8 years, he said. "You became a housewife, Naomi. As far as Aurelia is concerned, you haven't contributed anything useful in years. I invested the first money. You helped at the beginning. I sold my apartment, and I turned that money into a company." Lila shifted beside him. Grant placed his hand over hers. The gesture was small, but he wanted me to notice it. "You gave up your career by choice," he continued. "You cannot come back now and demand half of everything, because you regret it." I looked around the kitchen. The oak cabinets had been installed after Grant's mother came to live with us during cancer treatment. I handled her appointments, insurance appeals, medications, and hospice care, while Grant traveled for funding meetings. After she died, I stayed home because Aurelia was entering its most difficult expansion period. Grant said he needed one stable part of his life. For years, I provided that stability. I hosted investors. I revised presentations after midnight. I introduced him to 3 of the people who funded Aurelia. When his first manufacturing partner collapsed, I spent 10 days negotiating with its creditors while pretending I was only helping with household paperwork. Grant remembered none of that as work. "You moved money before giving me this agreement," I said. His face remained calm, but Lila looked at him. "What money?" "The bonus you received in December. It isn't listed in the financial statement. My compensation is a company matter. It became a marital matter when it was paid to you." He pushed the agreement closer. "My attorney drafted this. If you take it to court, you will spend the next 2 years paying lawyers. You have no current income, and you no longer understand how this company works." "I understand leverage. Remembering a few finance terms doesn't make you relevant." I held his gaze. Before Aurelia, before Cambridge, before the years of grocery lists and hospital visits, I had worked in distressed debt and corporate restructuring in Manhattan. Grant used to tell people I could look at a balance sheet and find the lie before the person who wrote it finished speaking. Now he spoke to me as if I had forgotten how numbers worked. Lila finally spoke. "Grant is trying to give you a clean start." Her voice was soft and careful. I turned toward her. "Is that what he calls it?" She glanced at Grant before answering. "He told me the marriage had been over for years. That must have made the hotel rooms easier." Grant struck the table with his palm. "Enough." The sound echoed through the kitchen. I did not move. He took a bundle of bills from his jacket and placed it beside the agreement. Here is $5,000 in cash. Take it and stay somewhere else tonight. The money spread across the table. Lila watched me, waiting for tears or shouting. I felt neither. For years, I had made decisions around Grant's needs. I moved to Boston because his first investor wanted Aurelia close to an engineering team in Cambridge. I left a job I loved because he said our marriage could not survive two demanding careers. I invested my own capital because I believed we were building something together. He had mistaken cooperation for dependence. I'm not signing, I said. You don't have a better option. I'll let my attorney decide that. Grant laughed. You don't have an attorney. Not yet. I collected the agreement and placed it inside the envelope. Then I handed the cash to Lila. You may need this when he stops paying for your apartment. Her expression changed. Grant stood. You have until Friday to reconsider. He walked toward the front door. Lila followed, but she paused in the hallway. I'm sorry, she said. She sounded almost sincere. That made it worse. After they left, I locked the door and went upstairs. At the back of my closet was a gray document case I had not opened in years. Inside were old transaction books, deal notes, and the incorporation records for North Star Holdings, the investment company I formed before marrying Grant. Beneath them was a black business card with a number written on the back. Owen Park had been 27 when I hired him as an analyst in New York. He was the only person on my team who challenged my assumptions without trying to impress me. 7 years earlier, when I told him I was leaving finance, he said, "Keep my number. People like you never really retire." I called. He answered on the fourth ring. Hello. Owen. There was a pause. Naomi? Yes. I opened the original Aurelia investment agreement. I need every record North Star is legally entitled to receive from Aurelia Grid Systems. I also need a review of its debt, related party transactions, and the Northeast Transit bid. His voice changed immediately. How quickly? Start tonight. I want the first report within 24 hours. Does Grant know? I looked at the divorce agreement on the desk. He will. Owen arrived in Boston the next afternoon. He had exchanged the inexpensive suits he wore as an analyst for a dark tailored jacket and a silver watch, but he still carried documents in an overfilled canvas bag. We met at the office of Amelia Brooks, the attorney he recommended. Amelia specialized in complex divorces involving privately held businesses. She read Grant's proposed agreement without changing expression. When she finished, she set it on the table. He is hoping you'll sign before receiving independent advice. That was obvious. What is less obvious is why he is in such a hurry. She pointed to the financial disclosure. The house is jointly titled, so he cannot simply declare it his. Massachusetts courts may consider property held by either spouse when dividing marital assets. His company interest will also require a proper valuation. He says the shares are worthless. He says many things in this document. Owen opened his laptop. I recovered the original North Star files from your corporate archive. North Star had been formed before my marriage. 9 years earlier, it invested $2.4 million in Aurelia's first institutional round. Most of the money came from the sale of my Manhattan apartment, which I had purchased before Grant and I married. In exchange, North Star initially received 18% of Aurelia's preferred shares. Several later funding rounds diluted that ownership. On a fully diluted basis, North Star now held 11.8%. The percentage had changed. The protective rights had not. As long as North Star owned more than 5%, Aurelia had to provide quarterly financial statements, annual budgets, notices of major borrowing, and details of transactions involving executives or related parties. North Star could also appoint a non-voting board observer. Grant stopped sending me reports 5 years earlier. At the time, he said the accountants were rebuilding the shareholder portal. I was caring for his mother and did not follow up. Later, when I asked, he told me North Star's rights had expired. They didn't, Amelia said. Owen turned his screen toward me. He also never repurchased or converted the shares. Can he cancel them now? Not without your agreement or a valid corporate action affecting the entire preferred class, Amelia replied. There is no record of either. Owen opened another file. Aurelia is incorporated in Delaware. North Star can make a formal books and records demand based on suspected mismanagement and undisclosed related party transactions. What related party transactions? That is the part Grant will not like. Owen had reviewed public filings, vendor websites, lien notices, and the limited information Aurelia had previously sent to investors. A company called Astor Strategic Services had received $1.8 million from Aurelia over 18 months. Astor claimed to provide government relations consulting and vendor coordination. Its website had been created 9 months earlier. The registered address belonged to a private mailbox service in Boston.
Who owns it?
The public filing lists a nominee manager. We'll need internal vendor records or subpoena power to identify the beneficial owner. Amelia made a note. We can include Astor in the inspection demand. Owen moved to the next page. Aurelia was competing for a $480 million contract to provide energy management software and charging infrastructure for a regional public transit electrification program. Grant had borrowed heavily to prepare for the bid. The company needed to provide the required bid security, demonstrate sufficient working capital, and submit a surety commitment confirming that a performance bond would be available if Aurelia won the contract. First Commonwealth Bank had supplied a temporary credit facility. Crestline Ventures, Aurelia's largest outside investor, had provided a limited guarantee and committed another $40 million if the project was awarded. What happens if they lose the bid? I asked. Owen leaned back. They cut almost a third of the company, renegotiate the debt, and raise money at a much lower valuation. And if Crestline withholds its next installment, they may not make payroll within 6 weeks. Grant described Aurelia's expansion as proof of strength. In reality, most of it was financed by the expectation that the transit contract would rescue the balance sheet. Owen showed me the projected revenue supporting the new credit facility. 3 large customer contracts accounted for more than half of the forecast. One customer had entered bankruptcy the previous month. Another document appeared to be a non-binding pilot letter. The third customer did not list Aurelia as a major supplier in any available record. Did the bank see these projections? They're referenced in the financing memorandum. If the underlying agreements aren't valid, Grant may have misrepresented the borrowing base. That is what we need to determine. Amelia closed the divorce agreement. First, we file the divorce complaint. Once Grant is served, the automatic financial restraining order limits both of you from transferring or concealing property outside ordinary expenses. He may have moved money already. Then mandatory disclosures and bank records will help us trace it. Second, we issue the corporate inspection demand through North Star. And third, Owen answered, we speak with Crestline. Crestline Ventures was led by Lydia Stone. I had met Lydia 12 years earlier, when she was managing a fund that made a disastrous investment in a retail chain. Her partners wanted to abandon the company and accept a complete loss. I showed her a restructuring path that preserved half the stores and most of the fund's investment. She later introduced Grant to one of Aurelia's earliest institutional investors. I had not spoken to her in 6 years. Will she help? I asked. Owen shook his head. She'll protect Crestline. If that helps us, she'll help us. That was the correct answer. I preferred people whose incentives were clear. Before Amelia filed the divorce complaint, she asked one final question. Do you want the marriage to end? I looked through the conference room window at the Boston skyline. Grant had humiliated me. He had hidden money and brought another woman into our home. Still, the question hurt more than I expected. 10 years did not disappear, because I finally understood them differently. Yes, I said. I want it to end. Amelia filed the complaint. At 4:20, a process server delivered the papers to Grant at Aurelia's headquarters. At 4:38, my phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. His message lasted 11 seconds. What are you doing, Naomi? For the first time in years, he sounded uncertain. Lydia Stone agreed to meet me the following morning. Crestline Ventures occupied the top floors of a glass building near Boston Harbor. The receptionist led me into a conference room facing the water. Lydia entered carrying a tablet and no visible curiosity. She was tall, silver-haired, and known for ending meetings before the other person realized a decision had been made. I heard you left finance, she said. I did. And now you're investigating your husband's company. I'm exercising North Star's shareholder rights. During a divorce. Yes. She sat across from me. Grant called last night. He said you were using confidential information to pressure him into a larger settlement. He brought his chief of staff into our house and asked me to surrender my shares for nothing. That is a personal issue. The loan projections are not. I gave her Owen's preliminary analysis. Lydia read in silence. She stopped at the customer contracts. Where did you get this? Public records, lender references from prior investor materials, and information Aurelia previously supplied to North Star. This doesn't prove the contracts are false. No. It proves they need to be verified. She continued reading. Aurelia's credit agreement required accurate financial information, disclosure of material related party transactions, and notice of events likely to impair the transit bid. The preliminary evidence suggested all three might be in question. Lydia looked up. What do you want Crestline to do? Conduct the review you should already be conducting. You want me to stop the next funding installment. I want you to avoid transferring $40 million based on information that may not be reliable. You understand what that could do to Aurelia. I understand exactly what it could do. She watched me. Are you prepared to lose the value of your own shares? If their value depends on false statements, that value is already gone. The answer seemed to satisfy her more than an appeal to our history would have. Lydia pressed a button on the conference room phone. Ask legal and portfolio operations to join us. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Crestline did not withdraw its investment. It sent Aurelia a formal request for supporting records and suspended the next installment until the review was complete. First Commonwealth received a similar notice from North Star. Amelia served Aurelia with the books and records demand. Grant called before I reached the elevator. This time, I answered. You went to Lydia. Yes. You had no right to interfere with that funding. North Star has information rights. Crestline has review rights. You're trying to destroy the company because I left you. I'm asking you to verify the numbers you gave the bank. They're projections. One customer is bankrupt. The contract was signed before the bankruptcy. Can the customer still pay? That isn't your concern. It became my concern when you borrowed against the projected revenue. His breathing changed. I imagined him in his office, walking between the window and his desk as he did whenever a conversation moved beyond his control. You've been out of the industry for 8 years, he said. You don't understand how growth companies are financed now. Then the review should prove me wrong. You know what happens if the transit authority hears about this. They'll hear about it if Aurelia can't meet the bid requirements. You're risking 500 jobs. Aurelia has 312 employees. He fell silent. Grant often rounded numbers upward when he wanted sympathy. You've been planning this, he said. No. You kept those shares hidden. You knew North Star invested. I thought you transferred them to a family trust. I never signed a transfer. He ended the call. An hour later, Aurelia's outside counsel sent Amelia a letter rejecting North Star's inspection demand. The company claimed I had abandoned my shareholder rights and was seeking documents for an improper personal purpose. Amelia read it twice. They have a problem. Why? If Aurelia believed North Star was no longer a shareholder, it should not have listed North Star on the capitalization table given to First Commonwealth last year. Owen had found the reference in an old investor update. Grant had used North Star's ownership when it helped demonstrate financial strength. Now he claimed the same shares did not exist. Amelia retained Delaware corporate counsel. Together, they prepared an expedited action in the Delaware Court of Chancery to enforce North Star's inspection rights. Before the case was filed, Aurelia sent a second letter. It offered limited access to documents if I signed a new confidentiality agreement preventing disclosure to Crestline, First Commonwealth, my divorce attorney, or any litigation expert. They want to give us documents we can't use, I said. They also want language suggesting you had no previous information rights, Amelia replied. I refused. That afternoon, Grant appeared on a local business podcast. The host asked about rumors of delayed financing. Grant smiled. Every growth company faces noise. Unfortunately, A private family dispute has been introduced into a business employing hundreds of people. He did not use my name. He did not need to. Photographs from our wedding appeared online beside headlines about a bitter founder divorce. Anonymous sources described me as a former banker who had struggled to adjust to life outside Wall Street. One article claimed I wanted a $50 million settlement. I had demanded no amount. By evening, strangers were sending messages to my social media accounts. Some called me greedy. Others accused me of destroying clean energy jobs because my husband had chosen someone younger. Grant had chosen his first counterattack. He would make the financial review look like revenge before the numbers became public. At 10 that night, Owen called. Crestline received the first supporting documents. Are the customer contracts valid? One is. One is a pilot letter. The bankrupt customer's contract was terminated 3 weeks before Aurelia submitted the financing memorandum. Grant had included revenue from an agreement he knew no longer existed. What about the third? We can't verify it. Why? The customer says the signature on Aurelia's copy does not belong to anyone authorized to sign contracts. The problem was no longer aggressive forecasting. Someone had submitted a false document. First Commonwealth suspended Aurelia's ability to draw from the remaining credit facility on Monday morning. The bank did not accuse Grant of fraud. It issued a reservation of rights letter, demanded updated records, and stated that no additional advances would be made until the customer documents were verified. Crestline kept its investment installment on hold. By noon, Aurelia could not provide the required bid bond and committed surety letter for the transit project. Grant asked for a 48-hour extension. The authority granted 24. At 2 in the afternoon, Aurelia's general counsel contacted Amelia. The company was willing to provide North Star with limited access to its accounting system if I agreed not to communicate with lenders or government agencies. We declined. At 4, Grant appeared at the house. The automatic restraining order had already been served, so neither of us could remove or conceal major personal assets outside normal expenses. He still used his key. I heard him enter while I was working in the study with Owen. Grant stopped in the doorway when he saw the financial models on my screen. For a moment, his old expression returned. Years earlier, when Aurelia was only an idea, he watched me build models at the dining table. He brought coffee and asked questions until midnight. Then his eyes moved to Owen. What is he doing in my house? The house belongs to both of us. Owen always wanted you to go back to New York. Owen closed his laptop. This has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with people who couldn't stand that I succeeded without them. I stood. What do you want? The bank gave us until tomorrow to cure the documentation problem. Then provide valid documents. You know it's more complicated. Who signed the third contract? Grant did not answer. Owen picked up his bag. I'll wait in the kitchen. After he left, Grant closed the study door. You need to call Lydia and tell her you made a mistake. I didn't. If we can't provide the bid security, Aurelia will be removed from the final round. That is the consequence of relying on revenue that didn't exist. It would have existed once the project was awarded. You borrowed against it before then. This is how companies grow. This is how they fail. His face tightened. You think you're still the smartest person in the room? No. I think the bank is entitled to accurate information. Grant stepped closer. I worked 10 years for this. So did I. You hosted dinners and reviewed a few presentations. I invested the capital that kept Aurelia alive. You invested in me. I invested in a corporation. That distinction matters now. He stared at me. Name your price. I almost thought I had misheard. For the divorce? For everything. The shares. The inspection demand. Crestline. You offered me $20,000 4 days ago. That was before you decided to burn down the company. I removed the divorce agreement from a drawer. You listed North Star's shares as worthless. Why would you pay me to surrender them? Grant did not respond. How much? I asked. $2 million. That is less than North Star invested. $5 million. Why are you frightened? I'm not. You brought your mistress into our kitchen because you believed embarrassment would make me sign. Now you're offering $5 million for shares you claim I abandoned. He looked toward the window. Lila should not have come to the house. That is what you regret? I handled it badly. You handled it honestly. You showed me what you thought I was worth. His phone vibrated. He read the message and swore. The transit authority rejected the extension. Aurelia had failed to cure the bit security deficiency. The company was removed from the final round. Grant sat in the chair across from my desk. For the first time since I had known him, he looked unable to decide what to do. If we lose the contract, we have to cut at least 100 jobs. You knew that before submitting the customer documents. I did what was necessary to keep the bid alive. Who created the false agreement? He raised his head. Call Lydia. Answer the question.
He stood.
You're enjoying this. I was not. Employees who knew nothing about our marriage would lose their jobs. Investors would lose money. Customers would question whether the company could support its systems. Grant created the risk. I exposed it. That did not make the consequences pleasant. I'm not stopping the review, I said. He left without another word. The next morning, Aurelia announced it had withdrawn from the transit bid to focus on strategic opportunities. No one believed the explanation. Suppliers shortened payment terms. 2 senior engineers resigned. A major customer demanded assurances that its support contract would continue. At 6 that evening, Owen sent me an encrypted message. Aurelia's lawyers had responded to a document request using language from a draft memorandum that only our forensic team had seen. Someone was leaking information to Grant. 8 people had access to the draft memorandum. Amelia trusted her staff. Owen trusted his. I did not trust either group enough to accuse anyone without proof. We created 4 versions of the next document request. Each contained one false but harmless reference. One mentioned a warehouse lease in Rhode Island. Another referred to an equipment purchase in New Hampshire. The third listed a fictional insurance claim. The version sent to Aurelia's chief financial officer, Evan Rhodes, mentioned a non-existent payment to a consulting firm called Harbor North Analytics. Each file also carried a different digital watermark. 2 days later, Grant's lawyer sent Amelia a letter accusing North Star of fabricating allegations about Harbor North. Evan's version had reached Grant. Owen reviewed the access logs. Evan downloaded the document 11 minutes after receiving it and forwarded an encrypted attachment to a private email account. The same account had exchanged messages with Grant's personal attorney. We have him, Owen said. What does he know? Probably everything. Evan had served as Aurelia's chief financial officer for 6 years. He signed the financing memorandum containing the questionable customer contracts. If the documents were false, he had his own exposure. Amelia sent him a preservation notice and requested an interview. He refused. That evening, he appeared at my house. He parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot. When I opened the door, he looked over his shoulder before entering. I have 15 minutes. You have as long as your lawyer permits. I didn't bring one. That was a mistake. He followed me into the living room. Evan was usually careful about his appearance. That night, his collar was open, and a dark stain marked one cuff. Grant is moving assets, he said. Personal or corporate? Both. The divorce order did not prevent Aurelia from making legitimate business payments. Grant was using that distinction. Astor has already received $1.8 million over the last 18 months, Evan said. Grant just authorized another $3 million prepayment for future consulting work. It's scheduled to go out tomorrow morning. Who owns Astor? I don't know officially. That means you know unofficially. Evan rubbed his forehead. Lila controls it. Does Grant know? He approved the vendor. That wasn't my question. I don't think he understands how much she's taken. Grant had allowed his mistress to influence company payments without asking where the money went. Perhaps she deceived him. Perhaps he preferred not to know. What else? Another $2 million is scheduled to go into an escrow account connected to Kestrel Ridge Partners. Kestrel Ridge was a private equity firm known for buying distressed technology companies. What is the stated purpose? A software licensing deposit. Is there a final license agreement?
No.
Did you approve the transfers? Yes. Why are you here? Evan removed a flash drive from his pocket. Grant's attorney drafted a statement saying I created the customer schedule without his knowledge. He intends to give it to the bank tomorrow. Grant had found his scapegoat. Evan's fear had finally become stronger than his loyalty. What is on the drive? Emails, payment approvals, internal messages, and the original contract files. Did you take them after receiving the preservation notice? I copied records I was authorized to access. Did you alter anything?
No.
We'll have a forensic examiner confirm that. He nodded. What do you want in exchange? I want North Star to tell the bank I cooperated. That is not my decision alone. You can influence it. I can state the truth. Nothing more. Evan looked disappointed, but he left the drive. The next morning, Amelia and Delaware Council obtained an emergency order preventing Aurelia from transferring the additional $3 million to Astor. The $2 million escrow transfer connected to Kestrel remained pending while the court reviewed the related documents. A forensic examiner created a verified image of Evan's drive. The records showed that Grant knew one customer contract had been terminated. He instructed finance to keep it in the forecast because he expected the customer to return after Aurelia won the transit project. The third contract was more complicated. Lila sent it from her personal account. Grant replied, "Use it in the preliminary package. We will replace it with a final after signature." No final contract existed. The drive also contained messages between Lila and a Kestrel partner. They discussed acquiring Aurelia's software assets if the company missed its debt payments. Lila expected a transaction bonus of $1.5 million. Grant was trying to save Aurelia. Lila was preparing to profit from its failure. Owen called after reviewing the files. There's more. He sent me a screenshot from Aurelia's internal messaging system. Grant had asked Evan to create an updated capitalization table removing North Star holdings. Evan responded that North Star could not be removed without a repurchase, conversion, or court order. Grant wrote, "Then find another way. Naomi abandoned the company years ago." I read the message twice. Grant was not only trying to defeat the inspection demand. He intended to erase the investment that started Aurelia. Amelia and Delaware Corporate Counsel filed an emergency motion preventing Aurelia from altering its capitalization records or taking action against North Star's shares. The Court of Chancery scheduled an expedited hearing. Grant responded by filing a Massachusetts lawsuit accusing me of misappropriating trade secrets and interfering with Aurelia's business relationships. His complaint claimed I obtained confidential information through Evan and shared it with competitors. We had shared nothing with any competitor. Crestline and First Commonwealth already possessed contractual rights to review Aurelia's finances. Grant knew that. The lawsuit was designed for headlines. His public relations firm described me as a disgruntled spouse with obsolete financial experience. I was not yet his former spouse, but that detail did not trouble them. Television crews waited outside the house. An opinion column accused me of jeopardizing American clean energy innovation. Another article presented Lila as a young executive trapped inside a bitter divorce. Then the Astor records became part of the Delaware proceeding. Aurelia had already paid $1.8 million to a company controlled by its chief of staff without disclosing the relationship. The court blocked the additional $3 million prepayment and ordered Aurelia to preserve all capitalization and related party transaction records. North Star retained its 11.8% fully diluted ownership, preferred share protections, and inspection rights. Grant's attempt to erase me had failed. The ruling did not restore Aurelia's financing. First Commonwealth declared a technical default based on inaccurate financial reporting and undisclosed related party transactions. The bank did not immediately demand full repayment. It appointed a restructuring advisor and gave Aurelia 30 days to present a credible plan. A Crestline refused to invest new money while Grant remained in control. Aurelia began missing payments to smaller vendors. Grant announced layoffs. 74 employees lost their jobs that week. Some of them sent messages to North Star. One engineer wrote that his wife was pregnant and their health insurance would end in 2 weeks. I read the message several times. There was no answer that would help him. Grant created the financial problem, but my actions forced it into the open. I had known jobs might be lost. Knowing did not make the names easier to read. Owen found me in the study late that evening. You should stop reading the messages. They worked for a company I helped finance. You didn't falsify the contracts.
No.
I only pulled the thread. The fabric was already coming apart. That sounds like something people say when they want to feel innocent. You aren't innocent. Neither am I. Restructuring is never clean. He sat across from me. The question is whether Aurelia keeps operating as a machine for Grant and Lila, or whether someone stops it before everyone loses more. The following morning, Lila contacted me. Her message contained one sentence. We should talk before Grant destroys what is left. We met in the lobby restaurant of a hotel near Logan Airport. Lila arrived in a beige coat and dark glasses. She chose a table facing the entrance. You brought Owen? He's in the lobby. I came alone. I didn't. She removed her glasses. For the first time since the night at my house, she looked tired. Grant knows about Kestrel, I said. He knows they're interested in Aurelia. Does he know about your transaction fee? Her eyes moved toward the window. I was protecting myself. With company money, Astor performed real work. Then provide the contracts and work product. You already decided I'm a criminal. I decided you were sleeping with my husband. The financial records are making the other decisions. Lila leaned forward. Grant told me you had no interest in Aurelia. He said North Star belonged to him. Did he also tell you to create the false customer agreement? He said the deal was final except for the signature. You sent it to finance as an executed contract. Because he said it would be signed. Why negotiate with Kestrel? Her expression hardened. Grant was going to fail eventually. And you wanted to be paid when it happened. I spent 2 years fixing his mistakes. You also hid them. He doesn't listen unless you make him believe an idea is his. There was anger in her voice that had nothing to do with me. Grant had not treated Lila as an equal either. He gave her influence without authority and promises he could later deny. She chose to profit from the arrangement rather than leave. Why did you ask to meet? Grant is moving Aurelia's patents into a new subsidiary. My attention sharpened. Which subsidiary? Rourke Advanced Systems. He plans to license the patents back to Aurelia and let the old company carry the debt. That requires board approval. He scheduled an emergency meeting during the Grid Forward Summit. When? Next Thursday. The summit was Aurelia's largest public event. Customers, investors, and reporters would attend. Grant intended to move the company's most valuable assets while a product demonstration took place upstairs. What do you want? Protection. From investigators? From Grant. You need your own attorney. I want a settlement with North Star. You took money from the company. I can return part of it. Part. I have expenses. Lila did not understand that negotiation required leverage stronger than an offer to return some of what she took. Give the documents to your lawyer, I said. If you cooperate, investigators will consider it. I won't buy your silence. She put on her glasses. You think you're different from Grant. I know how I'm different. What is that? I'm not asking you to trust me. She left through the hotel entrance. 2 hours later, Amelia received documents from Lila's attorney. They included the draft patent transfer agreement. Grant planned to strip Aurelia of its core assets before the bank could enforce its rights. The board meeting was 9 days away. First Commonwealth had no interest in helping me punish Grant. The bank wanted repayment. Its restructuring advisor concluded that Aurelia's assets were worth more if the company continued operating than if it entered an immediate liquidation. The main obstacle was leadership. Crestline would not invest under Grant. The bank would not extend the loan without new capital. Grant refused to resign. North Star could not solve the problem alone. Owen and I built a restructuring proposal. North Star would contribute $5 million. Crestline would invest $15 million if Grant and Evan were removed from financial control. A group of existing customers would prepay part of their service contracts in exchange for price protections. First Commonwealth would extend the remaining loan maturity. A Crestline affiliate would purchase a portion of the bank debt and convert that portion into preferred equity. The plan would dilute every existing shareholder, including North Star. Grant's common shares would lose most of their voting influence. North Star's percentage would also decline. I would not emerge owning Aurelia. I would have enough influence to appoint directors, protect North Star's investment, and support a professional management team. The proposal named Carol Mercer as interim restructuring officer. Carol had spent 20 years managing distressed technology and infrastructure companies. Both Crestline and First Commonwealth had approved her in advance. Lydia reviewed the proposal at Crestline's office. "You are putting new money into a company that may face a federal investigation," she said. "I'm investing in the operating assets, customer contracts, and engineering team." "What about the transit project?" "It's gone." "Growth projections?" "Reduced by 40%. Staff." "We keep the current workforce. We eliminate executive bonuses, close 2 leased offices, and shut down the autonomous vehicle division Grant launched without a customer." Lydia turned to Owen. "Is Aurelia viable under those assumptions?" "Yes, if the patents remain inside the company and the bank extends the maturity." She looked at me. "And if Grant refuses?" "First Commonwealth can exercise its default remedies. Aurelia may enter Chapter 11 or an out-of-court restructuring. That destroys more value, which gives him a reason to negotiate." Lydia did not commit that day. She requested an independent valuation and customer retention analysis. 3 days later, both supported our plan. Crestline signed a conditional commitment. First Commonwealth's credit committee approved the proposal in principle. The transaction remained subject to final lender documentation, any required preferred class approvals, and amendments to Aurelia's charter. We still needed the board. Aurelia had 7 directors. Grant controlled his seat and the votes of 2 founders who had worked with him from the beginning. Crestline held 1 seat. 2 seats belonged to independent directors. The 7th belonged to Martin Keene, a retired utility executive who had supported Grant for years but disliked the patent transfer proposal. North Star had a board observer, not a vote. To approve the restructuring and reject the patent transfer, we needed 4 directors. Lydia would support us. The 2 independent directors were open to removing Grant, but worried about litigation. Martin became the deciding vote. I met him at a quiet club outside Boston. He was 71 and wore the same navy blazer in every public photograph. "Grant says you want to take his company through the divorce," he said. "I want Aurelia to survive. You filed the actions that caused the lender to freeze funding. The bank froze funding after discovering inaccurate information. You knew what would happen." "Yes." He appreciated the answer, though he did not show it. "Why should I trust North Star?" "You shouldn't. Review the plan on its merits. And if it fails, the bank takes control or Aurelia enters bankruptcy. Grant believes he can obtain financing from Kestrel. Kestrel's proposal transfers the patents into a company owned by Grant. Aurelia keeps the debt and pays a licensing fee for technology it already owns." Martin's mouth tightened. "He says the new entity will license the patents back at a price Aurelia cannot afford." I gave him the draft agreement. He read several pages. "Where did you get this?" "Through counsel. Lila." "I can't discuss the source." He continued reading. After several minutes, he placed the agreement on the table. "I helped Grant recruit Aurelia's first engineering team." "I know. He was good then. He's still good at parts of the job." "You don't sound angry." "I am. Anger doesn't make every decision he made incompetent." Martin studied me. "Do you still love him?" The question surprised me. I loved the person I thought I was building a life with. That wasn't my question. "No," I said. "I don't think I do." He folded the agreement. "I'll attend the meeting. Will you support the restructuring?" "I'll listen." That was all he promised. The day before the summit, First Commonwealth confirmed its conditional approval. The agreement depended on the board rejecting the patent transfer and suspending Grant as chief executive while the investigation continued. At 6 that evening, Grant sent me a message. "Come to the summit tomorrow. We can settle everything privately before the board meets." I replied, "Send the proposal through counsel." His answer arrived immediately. "This is not about lawyers. It is about what we built." He still believed those were separate things. The Grid Forward Summit filled the largest ballroom of a Boston convention hotel. Aurelia had planned the event months before the failed transit bid and lender default. The stage displayed a charging station beneath a wall of animated city maps. Employees demonstrated software while reporters waited for Grant's keynote. The company wanted the room to feel normal. It did not. Several vendors had stopped attending. 2 customer logos had disappeared from the presentation. Security officers stood near every entrance. I arrived with Amelia and Owen. My badge read, Naomi Vale, North Star Holdings. An event employee stared at it before handing it over. Grant found me near the elevators. He wore a charcoal suit and the blue tie I gave him on our 10th anniversary. You came. You invited me. His eyes moved toward Amelia. I asked to speak privately. She's my attorney. Does she attend every conversation now? Only the ones that may become evidence. He looked tired. The past month had carved lines around his mouth. I might have felt sympathy if he had not continued trying to move the patents.
We can end this, he said. How?
You withdraw the divorce complaint and the litigation. I cancel the patent transfer. We tell the bank the customer documents were administrative errors. That doesn't resolve the false statements. Evan prepared them. You approve their use. He's willing to accept responsibility. He's cooperating with the investigation. Grant's expression changed. You spoke to him. He spoke to several people. Grant looked across the lobby. Lila entered through another door with her attorney. For a moment, no one moved. Grant watched her approach. You gave Naomi the patent documents, he said. I gave them to my lawyer. You stole company records. You approved the agreement. I told you to prepare options. You told me to have it ready for the board. The argument drew attention. Grant lowered his voice. You're finished in this industry. Lila gave a tired smile. So are you. Her attorney led her toward a private meeting room. Grant turned back to me. You believe her over me? I believe documents that can be verified. The board meeting began at 2 o'clock in a conference room behind the ballroom. The 7 directors were present, along with company counsel, Amelia, Delaware Corporate Counsel, First Commonwealth's advisor, and an investigator from the independent forensic firm. Carol Mercer waited in an adjoining room while the board considered her appointment. As North Star's observer, I could attend and present information, but I could not vote. Grant opened the meeting. Aurelia is facing a temporary liquidity issue caused by coordinated interference from a minority shareholder and several former employees. Lydia interrupted. The liquidity issue resulted from a lender default notice. Grant ignored her. He presented the patent transfer proposal. Under the plan, Rourke Advanced Systems would receive Aurelia's core software patents in exchange for a licensing arrangement and future investment from Kestrel Ridge. The company's attorney looked uncomfortable while describing it. Martin Keene asked the first question. Who owns Rourke Advanced Systems? Grant hesitated. A management group. Name the owners. I currently hold the shares, but Kestrel would invest at closing. So you personally own the entity receiving Aurelia's patents. Temporarily, one independent director leaned forward. Was the transaction reviewed by a special committee? There was no time. Was an independent valuation obtained? Kestrel provided an estimate. Kestrel is the proposed investor. Grant closed the presentation. The alternative is insolvency. That isn't the only alternative, Lydia said. She introduced our restructuring proposal. First Commonwealth would extend the remaining loan. Crestline and North Star would provide new capital. A Crestline affiliate would purchase part of the bank debt and convert it into preferred equity. A professional restructuring officer would assume temporary financial control. The patents would remain inside Aurelia. The transaction would proceed only after final loan documents, required shareholder and preferred class approvals, and any charter amendments. The proposal also required Grant's suspension while the financial investigation continued. He let Lydia finish. Then he looked at me. This is what you wanted.
No.
You couldn't stand being left behind, so you created a crisis and designed a transaction that puts you back in control. The company was already in crisis. You made it public. The lender discovered false documents. Through you. Through its contractual review rights. His voice rose. You walked away from Aurelia 8 years ago. I left daily operations. North Star remained a shareholder. You were my wife. I was also an investor. You can't separate those roles when it suits you. You separated them when you offered me $20,000 and listed my shares as worthless. No one spoke. Grant looked toward company counsel. This is a domestic dispute. Amelia displayed the original North Star agreement. Then she showed the capitalization table Aurelia provided to First Commonwealth the previous year. It listed North Star as holding 11.8% of Aurelia on a fully diluted basis, together with its preferred share protections. Grant had acknowledged North Star when it strengthened the loan application. His current lawsuit claimed those rights had been abandoned. The forensic investigator presented the Astor records. Aurelia had paid $1.8 million to the company controlled by Lila. Several invoices had no supporting work. The planned additional $3 million payment had been blocked by court order. The $2 million escrow payment connected to Kestrel was also presented. Grant looked at Lila's attorney. She had no authority to negotiate that. The investigator displayed Grant's email. Proceed with Kestrel. Keep the fee structure outside the board materials for now. Grant read it without speaking. The customer contracts followed. One had been terminated before the financing memorandum was submitted. One was a pilot letter. The third had never been signed by an authorized representative. Evan entered with his attorney. Grant's face tightened. Evan sat at the far end of the table. Did you prepare the customer schedule? Company counsel asked. Yes. Did you identify the agreements as executed revenue? Yes. Why? Grant directed finance to include them. Grant stood. That is false. Evan's attorney distributed copies of emails and document audit trails. The messages showed Grant instructing finance to retain the terminated contract in the projections. They also showed Lila sending the unsigned agreement and Grant approving its temporary use. Evan swallowed. I signed the certification. I should not have done it. Were you forced? One director asked. I was told the funding would close before anyone examined the details. That doesn't answer the question. No one forced me. I signed it. It was the first complete admission of responsibility anyone inside Aurelia had made. Grant looked around the table. Evan is protecting himself. Lila is protecting herself. Naomi wants the company. Every person here has an interest. Martin nodded. That's true. Grant seemed relieved. Martin continued. The difference is that the restructuring proposal discloses those interests. Yours did not. The board recessed for 20 minutes. Grant remained in the conference room with the two founder directors who supported him. Lydia spoke quietly with the independent directors. Martin stood near the window reading the restructuring plan again. I waited in the hallway with Owen. Through the ballroom doors, I heard the summit host introduce a panel on the future of urban energy. The event continued while Aurelia's future was decided in a room most guests did not know existed. Grant came into the hallway. Walk with me. Amelia started to follow. I shook my head. Grant and I moved toward a quiet service corridor. Security remained within sight. He stopped near a locked storage room. Did you ever intend to save the marriage? He asked. This month. Before Lila. I spent years trying. That isn't what I remember. What do you remember? You were never satisfied with Aurelia. I worried about the debt. You questioned every decision. You used to ask me to. That was when the company was small. When did accuracy stop mattering? He looked away. After my mother died, you changed. I was exhausted. You stopped attending events. I was caring for her while you traveled. She was your family too.
Yes.
That was why I did it. You chose to stay home. You asked me to leave my job. I asked whether our marriage could survive both of us working 80 hours a week. And I believed the answer had to be my career. We made that choice together. The sentence was familiar. Grant used we whenever a decision benefited him, and you whenever it created a cost. Why Lila? I asked. He seemed surprised. She made me feel like I was still building something. I helped you build a company. You made every conversation about risk. That was my profession. She believed in me. She arranged to collect a fee when Aurelia failed. His jaw tightened. I didn't know about that. You didn't want to know. He stepped closer. If the board approves your plan, they remove me. Temporarily, pending the investigation. Don't pretend this is temporary. I don't control the vote. You brought the bank, Crestline, Evan, and Lila into the same room. They came because you left each of them with something to lose. He lowered his voice. Stop the vote. I'll give you the house, $10 million, and your original investment. The assets are subject to the divorce process. You can't offer them privately. Then name something else. I thought about the man who had placed $5,000 beside my signature line. He had not changed his opinion of me. He had changed his estimate of my leverage. I want the board to vote. He stared at me, then returned to the conference room. The meeting resumed at 3:40. The first motion rejected the patent transfer. 5 directors voted to reject it. Grant and 1 founder director voted against the motion. The second founder director abstained after reviewing the conflict documents. The rejection prevented the $2 million escrow payment from being released. The escrow agent later returned the money to Aurelia. The second motion approved the restructuring proposal, subject to final lender documents and required shareholder and preferred class approvals. Lydia, the 2 independent directors, Martin, and 1 founder director voted in favor. Grant and the remaining founder director voted against it. The third motion suspended Grant as chief executive and appointed Carol Mercer as interim restructuring officer. Lydia, both independent directors, and Martin voted in favor. Grant and the 2 founder directors voted against it. The final count was 4-3. Grant remained seated after the result was announced. Company counsel informed him that his access to financial systems, bank accounts, and executive email would be suspended immediately. He would retain his board seat until the shareholders or board took further action. You can't remove me from my own company, he said. Martin Keene answered. It isn't your company. The words landed harder, because they did not come from me. The board authorized counsel to provide the forensic findings to First Commonwealth, the relevant procurement authority, and law enforcement agencies if requested. No one was arrested in the meeting. No dramatic agents entered through the doors. The legal consequences would take months. The corporate consequences began immediately. Grant was escorted to his office to collect personal items. Lila left with her attorney. Evan remained for another interview. Lydia and the bank advisor began reviewing the final restructuring timetable. Carol Mercer entered from the adjoining room, accepted the appointment, and joined company counsel to prepare an employee announcement. I walked into the ballroom shortly before 4:30. The summit host had delayed Grant's keynote. Employees and guests watched the stage, waiting for an explanation. Carol took the microphone. She announced that Aurelia had approved a financing plan and leadership transition. The company would continue operating. The failed transit bid and financial review would reduce growth, and additional changes were likely. She did not describe the meeting as a victory. It was not one. Aurelia had lost its largest opportunity. Dozens of employees had already been dismissed. The company faced investigations and years of rebuilding. After the announcement, reporters surrounded the executives near the stage. One approached me. Ms. Vale, did you engineer the removal of your husband? I exercised North Star's shareholder rights and supported a restructuring proposal. Was this revenge for his affair?
No.
Would you have started the investigation if he hadn't asked for a divorce? I considered giving a polished answer. I don't know, I said. I should have reviewed the company earlier. The reporter paused. Do you regret what happened? I regret that it became necessary. Grant stood near the back of the ballroom with a security officer. For a moment, our eyes met. He looked at me as though I had become someone else. I had not. He had simply stopped seeing the parts of me that were inconvenient. The divorce took 9 months. Grant's first settlement proposal collapsed after mandatory financial disclosures and subpoenaed bank records exposed several transfers he had failed to report. His December bonus had been paid to a management company he controlled. Part of the money funded Lila's apartment and travel. Another portion had been transferred into an investment account shortly before he presented the divorce agreement. The court ordered the funds preserved. North Star had been formed before the marriage, and its investment could be traced to the sale of my premarital apartment. The final settlement credited that source, while also considering Aurelia's growth during the marriage and the contributions both Grant and I had made. Grant's Aurelia shares were part of the broader marital property analysis. The house, retirement accounts, compensation, and other property were negotiated under Massachusetts' equitable distribution principles. I did not receive everything. Neither did Grant. We sold the Cambridge house because neither of us wanted to purchase the other's share at the appraised value. After the mortgage and costs, the remaining equity was divided under the settlement. Grant retained a reduced block of Aurelia common shares. Most had lost voting influence under the restructuring. I retained North Star and received a fair portion of the marital assets. No one left penniless. Grant left with less because of the value he destroyed and the transfers he tried to conceal. The corporate investigation continued separately. Lila returned part of the money paid to Astor under a civil settlement. She cooperated with investigators reviewing the financing documents and related party transactions. Evan entered his own cooperation agreement. Grant's attorneys disputed every suggestion that he intentionally defrauded the bank. They argued that the customer schedule reflected expected contracts and that Aurelia intended to replace the preliminary documents before final funding. The outcome depended on evidence, intent, and negotiations beyond the divorce. During our final mediation, Grant asked to speak with me alone. Amelia objected. I agreed to 5 minutes in a conference room with the door open. Grant had lost weight. He no longer wore the expensive watch Aurelia gave him after its Series C financing. I ended things with Lila, he said. She ended them when Kestrel withdrew. That isn't what happened. It doesn't matter. I was wrong about her. Yes. And about you. I waited. He looked down at his hands. When my mother became ill, you handled everything. I told myself you wanted to stop working. I wanted her to be cared for. I thought you were happier at home. You never asked. I should have. Yes. He took a breath. We can try again. The suggestion did not shock me. Grant had spent months losing control of his company, home, finances, and public identity. He wanted to return to the last period when his life felt stable. I had provided that stability. We can't, I said. You don't know that. I do. Because of the affair? The affair ended the illusion. It wasn't the only problem. I apologize. You apologized after the board removed you. I'm apologizing now. You still describe my work as something I did to you. He leaned back. You took the company. The board approved a restructuring after Aurelia defaulted. You knew how to make that happen. I knew how to uncover the condition Aurelia was already in. Do you hear yourself? Everything is a transaction. That is how you treated our marriage when you put $20,000 beside my signature line. He closed his eyes. I was angry. You prepared the agreement with lawyers. Lila convinced me you would fight for everything. So you tried to leave me with almost nothing. I thought North Star was part of the family. It was part of the family when you needed its money. Grant looked toward the hallway. What happens to me now? It was not a question I could answer. His remaining legal problems, career, and wealth depended on courts, investigators, creditors, and Aurelia's shareholders. His personal life belonged to him. You start over, I said. With what? The same thing you offered me. He understood. A clean start sounded generous only when he believed I would be the one forced to take it. The settlement documents were signed that afternoon. The judgment entered several weeks later. Our divorce became final after Massachusetts' statutory waiting period. I did not celebrate. I returned to the apartment I had rented near the Charles River and cooked dinner alone. For years, an empty room frightened me because I associated it with being abandoned. That evening, it was simply quiet. Aurelia survived. The company did not return to its former valuation, and it did not win another project as large as the transit contract during the following year. Carol Mercer closed the autonomous vehicle division and sold an unused testing facility. Several executives left. Customer contracts stabilized. The engineering team released a smaller software platform for municipal fleets and private logistics companies. It was less glamorous than Grant's vision. It produced real revenue. The restructuring closed after the bank documents, preferred class approvals, and charter amendments were completed. North Star participated in the financing round but did not control daily operations. Its ownership percentage declined again after the new capital entered. I accepted a board seat and chaired the Audit and Risk Committee. At the first meeting, I required every related party transaction to be reviewed by independent directors. No executive could hire a company owned by a romantic partner, relative, or close associate without full disclosure. The rule should never have been necessary. Experience suggested otherwise. Owen reopened an old conversation during dinner one evening. "You're taking restructuring clients again," he said. "I advised 2 companies. You charged both of them. That generally makes them clients." He smiled. "Are you coming back to New York?"
No. Good.
"I dislike New York now." "You live there." "That's how I know." We formed a small advisory partnership with offices in Boston and New York. I did not try to rebuild the exact career I left. The industry had changed.
So had I.
Our work focused on founder-led companies where personal relationships, family money, and corporate control had become dangerously tangled. There were more of them than I expected. A year after the divorce, I was invited to speak at a restructuring conference in Manhattan. The hotel stood 3 blocks from the office where I began my career. After the panel, I walked past the building. The lobby had been renovated. The coffee shop beside it was gone. I felt no urge to enter.
My phone rang.
The number was unfamiliar, but the New York area code was not. "Naomi." The voice took me back more quickly than the street did. "Jonah." Jonah Price had worked beside me during my final years in Manhattan. We competed for promotions, argued over investments, and dated for almost a year before I ended the relationship and chose a future with Grant. Jonah later founded Cinder Peak Energy, one of Aurelia's competitors. His company submitted a bid for the transit project, though another consortium eventually won. "I heard you were speaking today," he said. "You follow restructuring conferences now." "I follow companies that survive disasters." That sounds like a business reason. It was the safest opening line. I stopped near the corner. Traffic moved slowly through the evening light. "What do you want, Jonah?" "Coffee." "About Aurelia?"
No.
That isn't a reassuring answer. He laughed. "You still assume every conversation has terms." "Most of them do." "Then here are mine. 1 coffee. No business proposal. No questions about your former husband unless you bring him up. And what do you receive? An answer to whether you still take your coffee without sugar." I looked through the cafe window beside me. For years, every major decision in my life had been tied to someone else's ambition, illness, company, or need. I was not looking for another person to define what came next. Coffee did not have to mean that.
"Tomorrow morning," I said.
8:30. "I'll be there." "And Jonah?" "Yes." I use sugar now. After the call, I remained on the sidewalk for a moment. The woman reflected in the glass did not look like the person Grant described in our kitchen. She was not an obsolete banker or a useless housewife. She was not the ruthless Wall Street legend people wrote about after Aurelia's restructuring either. Those were convenient versions created by other people. The less dramatic truth was harder to accept. I had ignored warning signs because confronting them would have forced me to admit what my marriage had become. When Grant handed me the agreement, he expected the years away from finance to keep me quiet. He was wrong about my ability. I had also been wrong. I believed protecting a marriage meant making myself useful enough that the other person would never choose to leave. That belief kept me in a life where my work disappeared as soon as it stopped benefiting him. The divorce did not return the years I gave up. Taking a board seat did not repair every career decision. Grant losing control of Aurelia did not make the layoffs harmless. There was no clean ending in which every loss became a victory. There was only the life I had after I stopped signing away pieces of it. The next morning, I reached the cafe before Jonah. I ordered coffee with 1 packet of sugar and took a table near the window. At 8:29, the door opened. I did not know where the conversation would lead. For once, I did not need to know before it began.